Stuart, I look at you and I see play personified. Tell me about play and play as a part of longevity in our lives.
It's nothing special for me. It's there for all of us. It's a matter of engaging it and activating it in your life and finding it and prioritizing it and allowing it to really make you an authentic self because it is deeply embedded in who you really are. And if you look at your play nature and have a chance to hook onto it and maintain its vitality throughout life, it's energizing. So I'm fortunate, to be at this old age and still playful. I'm very grateful and very lucky.
Well, what is it? How do we as adults, how do we refine our play nature? Because I don't know about a lot of my colleagues we were so programmed with our time and we're so serious about everything that we're doing to just get through the day, get through the week, the year. How do we get back to being more playful?
I think this is part of the joy of the science of play that I have found rich and increasing in its importance as I've studied play, and that is begin to prioritize and recognize it as a central part of human nature. We don't think too much about brushing our teeth in the morning or washing our hands or eating a fairly good diet or getting a good night's sleep, but we don't tend to begin to think of, let's look at today. Am I going to play today? Is play an important part of today? This is for an adult. Or for a child, is that child going to be self-directed through their own play nature? Am I going to allow my child not to be my child, the ballerina, or my child, the doctor, but my child, the child? Who is this person? And watch their play nature, because the play nature often shows where talent is, often shows where the deep authenticity of sustained motivation is, and it's a tremendously significant portion of who we are. In our culture, we have tended to devalue that, particularly for adults. Well, it's true. Adults don't have the urge to play as much as a little child does. That's who they are. An adult has to worry about paying the mortgage and getting the garbage out and doing the dishes and all that stuff. But even those things, taking the garbage out, doing the dishes, singing a song while you're brushing your teeth, whatever, is still room for play to infuse that life. And I think it's being able to prioritize this. Why is this important? Well, if you didn't eat vitamin C and you were a seaman in the 1600s, you got scurvy. Well, what do you get if you don't play? You get rigidity, lack of optimism, smoldering depression, an inability to be authentic about what your own motivation is, disengaged from the things that bring you joy. There's just a tremendous amount that play itself provides you, and our culture somehow has lost track of that to the same degree that science tells us it's really important.
It's interesting that you talk about our culture, and then you mentioned sleep, you mentioned eating, and hygiene, movement, and all of those things, and then play. And I think as a society, we probably don't think of play as being as important as those, but maybe you could help us understand why we should.
Well, I think if you look at the outcomes, as I have mentioned earlier in our talk, about serious play deprivation, you begin to see what happens to a life when it's totally missing. And when you see that, it's like missing all the vitamin C you should have had if you're cross country or a seaman out to sea for months and months, because then you have a deficiency disease. Well, play doesn't give an obvious disease state, but there are emotional and cognitive and spiritual qualities that are really missing if you don't have any joy in your life, if you don't have what really fulfills you in life. And play itself is the avenue toward a good deal of that sense of mission and fulfillment.
I recently read some research about play being biological, and that it was tied to certain areas of the brain. Could you help us better understand that?
Well, it's very ancient in its origins in humanity. If you take, for example, let's take mammals that go a couple 100 million years as to how their heritage is concerned. And you look at the common threads that tie mammals together. Let's take the ordinary rat, for example. Rats play a lot. We're not rats. But when you observe what play does for the rat population, and you see by studying rat brains where the play impulses are, they are in what's called the subcortical area of the brain. The cortical area of the brain is where intricate executive function and planning and other things take place. So I know when I was first studying play, I thought all play was learned. I didn't realize that play is innate. And when you take a rat, for example, and you remove surgically the cerebral cortex, the higher center, and you let that little baby rat that's had that surgery heal up, and then you put that rat back into its place with other rats, students who observe that rat play can't tell the difference between the decorticated rat and the normal rat. The decorticated rat plays just as much early as the normal rat does. And that says that the circuits that undergird play are ancient, survival, the same things that the immune system and breathing and heart rate, that play is tied right in with those circuits. And that fact is not something that's generally thought as being common sense by the human culture at large, because you can get along and survive without playing, whereas you can't survive without sleep and you can't survive long enough without vitamins and so on. But so the play, although it's of central, I think, ultimate survival importance, it's not of the same level as sleep and dreams, for example, and nutrition. But it's nonetheless a priority, subcortically wired, ancient in its origins, necessary for social and particularly for effective social belonging. Play is central.
What I heard was that play is something that is motivated deeply from within me, and it's a feeling that I have, but it's not something that I'm learning like in school, or it's not something that I've learned. It's something that I have an impulse that's natural, just like I have when I get tired, I have an impulse to sleep.
Yes.
And just like when I get hungry, I have an impulse to eat.
You're right on, Tom.
I mean, that is just amazing for us to understand that that's a phenomena.
Well, let's take a little baby, for example, where a baby that's 2-3 months old, capable for the first time of a social smile. And the mother or the caretaker gets their face in front of the little baby. The baby sees the face, and all of a sudden the baby smiles like crazy. The mother or the caretaker has an upsurge of joy. Their eye contact comes together, their brains are in sync, and they are activated by mutual joy. That's an instinctive play nature that then stays with us the rest of our lives. It gets modified by life and by circumstances. But that's a huge instinctive part of being a human being. And when we don't pay attention to that, particularly as adults, we get into trouble.
Well, I kind of started off talking to you about how, in a sense, you're a hero to me because of just the joy and the playfulness that you have and you exude in society, and you go around and you spread all this knowledge about why play is so important. What advice do you have for us to help us just have experience that joy that we once had as a child, and we want to have it again now as an adult, a mature adult?
Not an easy thing to answer, because in the many, many play reviews that I've done, I find that people are entirely different as to what really turns them into joyful, playful people. For some, it's object play. For some, it's collecting stamps. For another, it's going for a hike. For somebody else, it may be risk-taking. There are differences in what really appeals. If you can find what it is and what they are that appeal to you, that fit your own personal play style, your play personality, your play style, and then you prioritize that to where you say, this is an important part of my life. If I'm going to have reasonable mood elevation and reasonable optimism and less depression and more ability to get along with others, I better find my play nature. And my play nature is my own. It's not anybody else's.
So how does somebody go about, you say reach back, have memories, do some research on yourself. Boy, what a concept. I'm researching all my life on everybody else. I never research on myself.
Oh, but it's not easy, particularly if you think about how early play nature emerges. When you observe an infant, you'll find that infant may enjoy highly colored handkerchiefs when they're 3 months old, or they may look at the ceiling and look at mobiles, or they may listen to music and find that the music at that age, they've already got preferences that produce joyfulness. Mm-hmm. Well, finding that in the screen of amnesia is not easy, particularly if you've lost the ability to play and you haven't been authentic in your own play nature. But you can almost always find that by searching for it and by prioritizing it and saying, this is really important. Who am I really? What does this really, where does this fit? Where should I be gardening or should I be a physicist? Those are really different. But either one can be fulfilling one's play nature.
I see. So in our work at the National Institute for Play, you've written and provided information on play personalities. Maybe you could explain where people could go and go find more information about this to help them find their own play nature.
Well, I think that the website has some avenues, and I think this takes a certain amount of private introspection if you're an adult, and if you're a parent, it takes the ability to have kind of hands-off. What is it that this infant, this young child of mine, or if you're a teacher in a preschool or elementary school, what is it that tends to light the candle of this little kid? And pretty soon you get an idea from observing that what works for the kid, but it also, as a teacher, of you yourself, I wonder what got to me when I was little. Was it a pet? Was it a trip with my parents? Was it a birthday party? There are all kinds of things that tend to lighten up one's own play nature and give you some insight about it.
So you mentioned the website being the National Institute for Play's website, right, which is nifplay.org. And if we put in the search there, play personalities, we could find some relevant information to help us.
Well, I have outlined 8 kinds of, the collector, the storyteller, the director, the artist, the mover, and so on, that these are natural archetypes which tend to cluster and give one some avenue of illumination about where their play personality is. But it's up to them to kind of find it themselves.
I think that would be really, really helpful in understanding your own play nature as well as your mates or your other friends and in your relationships to see where to better understand them, and so you can be empathetic, like you mentioned. I think that's very valuable information in all of our relationships.
I agree.
So, Stuart, we've talked a lot about play personality here. Can you give us a really good example of someone that we could relate to and better understand this whole phenomena?
Well, I don't know if it's a normal someone, but it's somebody who has had a big impression on my life. His name was Roger Guillemot. He recently passed away. When I was a sophomore medical student, I was involved in doing what's called prosections in the anatomy lab. And Roger Guillemot was an instructor in physiology at the medical school I went to. And Roger was examining human brains because we were not dissecting the human brain part of the cadavers. And so I got acquainted with him because I was working nights, preparing a dissection for the next day. And one night I said to him, "Roger, what are you doing?" And he had a French accent. He said, "Well, Stuart, I have found that the veins that lead from the hypothalamus of the brain to the pituitary are too large. They don't make physiologic sense." And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" He says, "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." 25 years later, Roger Guillemot discovered releasing factors from the brain going through those veins into the pituitary gland, producing releasing factors, which then the array of thyroid function and gonadal function and everything else is released by what comes out of the hypothalamus. That was his discovery. Segue, and I'm now living in Southern California, and Roger Guillemot has received the Nobel Prize. He's now at the Salk Institute. We get to be pals because we live close to each other. Mm-hmm. And he says to me one night, "Stuart, come over and see my lab at Salk Institute." So I go over to the lab. Seeing his lab with him in his lab with all kinds of intricacies for short-term protein analysis and brain analysis was, to me, a highly intricate thing. He was in a playground. You couldn't tell his play from when I was a medical student to when he was in the Salk lab as an emeritus professor. He was playing and working they were interplayed, and there comes a Nobel Prize.
That just made me tingle all over, because what you just said was this highly intense work was playful.
He was totally playful.
Totally playful.
And he couldn't tell the difference between his work and his play.
So are you saying that work can be playful?
I'm saying work should be playful. If at all possible. Not all work. Some work is drudgery. But I think somebody showed me a video once of Brazilian garbage collectors. Mm-hmm. And the Brazilian garbage collectors, between their collection, would drum on the garbage cans and have all kinds of fun. So fun. Their work and their play, which could have been really tough work, was both.
They made it playful.
Right.
That sounds like a secret that we all need to know. How do we make our work more playful? Wow. That
pretty significant.
That's a big deal. That's a really big deal. Do you think that corporations could embrace play to have their workforce be more productive, healthier, better attitudes, etc.?
I think it's a challenge, but I think it's worth considering for sure. And I think some corporations already have subcultures within them that are highly playful. So, and they're more creative, and they're more innovative, and they're more adaptive, and they're more subject to being shifting if there is an economic or political shift in the winds.
So, in a sense, what I've just learned is that play not only can help us individually throughout our lives and be healthier human beings and more productive and all that, but also can help us in our work to help us be more successful in our work and to create almost a tribe in our work where we all are together and working together and beating to the same or marching to the same tune, if you will, like the Brazilian garbage collectors. That just sounds awesome.
Yeah.